Hello, everybody. Hope you're all having a good Saturday evening. And I am going to be streaming as I ink Chapter 22, page 6 of Age of Night. I did a fair amount of the penciling of this on a previous art stream. As you can see, I finished it now. That giant crowd scene was a beast, but it is penciled. And now I've got to start inking it. I'm going to put my reading glasses on like an old woman. And if you've watched me ink before, then you know I like to start by doing some of these straight edge and French curve sections to get them out of the way. I'll probably be bouncing back and forth between doing straight edge work and freehand work, so it won't all be this dull, hopefully. And every time after I do a couple of strokes, I clean off the edge of my ruler, well, triangle in this instance, so that I hopefully don't end up with a big gloopy mess after ink builds up on there. Now I've got to do all these stairs. Oh, my line's getting a little ragged there. It looks like I probably need more ink. And again, need more ink. In last week's art stream, which was still on Friday afternoon, I'm kind of switching it up, trying to find a good time that's going to work, because my family's schedule is going to change as the school year starts back up in a couple of weeks, so Friday afternoons are no longer going to work for me, and they're not the most convenient time for people who keep more traditional working hours, so I'm experimenting with different times. So Saturday evening, let's see how this goes. But as I was saying, last week for the art stream, I was penciling this page, and you got to see me do this staircase in perspective, which, if that's something you'd like to learn how to do, you should look up last week's stream. There are a fair number of steps to it, but steps, get it? But it's actually not that difficult. And the results are pretty impressive. It's nice to have your staircase actually look like it belongs and works in perspective. All right. I've got all my stairs put in. All right, now all of this is going to be wet for a little while, so I'm going to move over to this next panel, just so I'm not dragging my triangle through all of that wet ink and making a terrible mess of what I've just done. I don't want to do that. To a certain degree, it's kind of inevitable that you end up making some little messes and mistakes when you're inking, especially with other tools like this, but try to plan to avoid it as much as possible. Getting some more of these straight architectural elements in here. And let's see, I think I can do this tile roof in the corner without dragging my triangle through any of my wet ink. I believe I can, so that's what I'm going to try to do. Now I'm using the straight edge to keep my edge in line, but you can see I'm making little bumps and ridges for the edge of these tiles. Definitely need to keep that going. I don't want to just have a totally straight line there, because then they won't look like separate tiles. They'll just look like weird lines instead of actually delineating separate objects. There we go. All right, let's go back over to this panel. Those stairs should be pretty dry by now. You can see I kind of try to do all the ones that are going in a particular direction at the same time. I'm just trying to be as methodical as I can to get this done in as few passes as possible. So if I miss one of these lines, then I'm going to have to wait for everything to dry again before I can come back in and redo it. So if I just very methodically get all of the ones going in the same direction, then I can do that all in one pass, and it should take me less time. Oh, I just saw this on the camera and just about had a heart attack because I thought I had an ink smudge, but it is an eraser crumb that floated onto my page somehow. Whew! That was almost very upsetting. All right, over here, I'm going to scoot myself toward the camera. There we go. And down here. Encroached on the word balloon just a little bit. Just a little. Cleaning my triangle again. And I'm going to clean out my pen now too. I've got a little cup of water out of frame and just make sure I get in there with my paper towel and get all the gummies out of there. All right, so now I'm going to go back up to this panel, and it's going to be French curve time. Which, to use a French curve, you kind of just have to move it around until you find a section of a curve that matches the curve on your tool. You will often need to use multiple parts of the tool on one curve, because the tool does not make perfectly symmetrical curves in a lot of places, or your curve may not be all that symmetrical, or whatever else. But it's very handy. It takes a little finesse to use. Oh, geez. I just sent my triangle flying. Goodness. Okay. So those are all quite wet right now. So I'm going to move back over here. Oh, come on. The pen's doing that thing where it will not release the ink that it has. When it does that, I usually just dip it back in the inkwell real quick and give it a little wipe on my paper towel to hopefully get it flowing again. All right. Making progress there. Let's see. I've got a couple more curves over here. So we've got the other side of this arch. And then the other side of this arch. There we go. I think I'm just going to freehand that little one. It's small enough that it would actually be more trouble than it's worth really to try to find a curve that lines up. All right, giving that a chance to set. I'm going to do this over here. So you can see I'm just kind of like, I'm trying to find places. Now, as you get more of them done, it gets a little trickier. But I can just kind of scooch that in right between this line that's probably still a little wet and this line that might still be a little wet. It's probably dry by now, but just in case. Ones that I've done fairly recently. Also, it doesn't help that it's freaking humid right now. There we go. And then over here, these are still a little bit wet, so I'm going to give those a second. I don't really want to make trouble for myself. So stuff over here is wet, stuff over here is wet. I'm going to come down here and do a little bit of freehand inking for a second. It's supposed to be like a wooden door next to her. And get some of that wood texture in. Using my Croquill nib pen as usual. Hunt 107. I say because with a questioning tone because I can never remember. I always get the 102 and the 107 confused. I have to pull it out and look at it every time I have to order more of them because I just doesn't want to stick in my brain for some reason. All right, so this is going to be like a door jamb. Even though I'm going to put another texture on it. I like having the horizontal-ish lines there to indicate that this is a different plane from the one next to it. And I'm going to do those going to do those little guidelines I like to do just to keep my vertical lines from getting too wonky, because they like to do that. Alright, put a little bit of stippling to give this a little bit of a stone texture. Stippling is possibly the absolute slowest way to texture something, but sometimes it just has the right look for what you're trying to do. So, despite how painfully slow it can be. Getting there, though. All the little dots. Bring that a little closer into frame. Why is my phone buzzing? Somebody's trying to call me. Somebody's trying to call me, and I have no idea who they are. Don't recognize the number. It's from an area code in which no one should reasonably be calling me. I'm going to ignore it. Alright, so this is a corner of a building, or at least it's supposed to be. So over here is going to be something completely different because it's not the building anymore. That's the edge of the building. But I don't really want to have that background be too distracting because, as you can see, there is a whole lot going on at the bottom of this page. So I want to leave this panel fairly simple. The idea, especially too, where she's saying, oh, it's starting to look familiar. I think the market should be right around, you know, something's coming, but you don't want to see it yet. That kind of suspense of something's going to happen. Now, I'm getting kind of broken lines here, so I'm going to clean out my pen real quick. Sometimes that's just because the pen's getting a little gunky. And reload. Let's see if that helps. Now there's a hair stuck to it. Darn cat. Cat hairs everywhere in my life. Alright. That definitely helped. Every so often you just gotta pause and remember that, oh yeah, I gotta clean this out periodically. The quality of your line is degrading. There's probably a reason for it. Alright, so it's going to be kind of a grade from darker to lighter gray here, so we'll kind of taper that off. Do another pass down here where I want it a little darker. Do want to keep it all just going in one direction though. I'm not going to cross hatch it because this is one of those page design things where having all of the hash marks pointing this way, because this is the way that I want the viewer's eye to go. They should have just read this balloon and then gone down over this way, and this motion here is enforcing that. It's enforcing the flow on the page. You know, in theory. All right, that looks like it needs to be blended in just a little more. Still looking a little harsh down at the bottom there. That's better. That's a softer grade. Okay, come back over here for a second. Now that all of this should be thoroughly dry up in the corner. And come on. The edge of that roof. There we go. And I see some gunk building up in my pen, so I gotta clean that. All right, and now I'm going to put some of the lines for the paving stones on the street here. And I'm gonna try to keep little breaks in this line because I don't really want it to be super, I don't want it to be like this really solid, distracting kind of feature. I want to break it up a little bit, keep it looking organic, keep it pushed to the background. It is literally the ground. It doesn't need to be these big, solid, bold lines popping forward. You can see how wonky the lines that I drew freehand for these actually are. It's kind of funny. All right. There's those. The other set of lines for those papers, I'm going to do freehand. Partially because doing them with the ruler is exceptionally tedious, but I do kind of want to keep them looking a little bit more organic, a little more wonky. And this should be dry now, and I can do this section. Oh geez, that's a big fat ink blob that just decided to plop out on my triangle. So I'm just gonna, one of the other strategies you can do if you don't want to have to immediately pick it up and deal with it, even though you should, so just kind of scoot it out of the way so that you're not still dragging your pen back through that big, scary, dangerous ink blob. Because if you disturb it, it's way more likely to cause you a problem. And we don't want that. All right, so now I think I've pretty much done all of my tools work on these panels. I have not yet tackled this monster panel down here. That might have to be its own session because good grief. Just look at it. All right, so don't mind me taking a sip of my beverage. My beverage is grape juice this evening. Actual grape juice, not like a euphemism for wine or anything. Just saw some grape juice in the fridge and was like, yeah, I could go for that. Even though I almost never drink fruit juice. Just generally try not to drink anything too sugary, so I don't usually drink any fruit juice, but for some reason the grape juice called to me. All right, there's those stairs. Now over, oh, that's a moth. Go away, moth. Darn moths. All right, so up here, this right here, this inside of this arch should be, the inside of this arch should be following this set of perspective lines. They're hard to tell the difference from on camera here, but one set is red and one set is pink. This set that's going like this is this wall, this large wall here. This set that's disappearing off to the left belongs to this wall, which means that it also belongs to the inside of this curve here. So that's the set of lines that I need to follow when I'm putting texture and shading on the inside of this arc to help maintain its illusion of dimension. That's a really easy mistake I see people make a lot of times when they're trying to add textures to things, but they do not put the textures in the appropriate perspective for the scene that they're in. And it makes the textures look wrong, and it makes the image look flat or wonky or somehow simultaneously both. It's just like, yes, not only does the form have to be in perspective, the textures on it have to be in perspective too, or else it don't work. I'm actually going to make this wall pretty dark because the light is coming in from here. So there wouldn't be as much of it hitting this wall, or there would be light hitting this wall. Since right over here, this archway is basically our only light source for this scene. one's not going to be quite as dark, but still not super light. I do want this right here to be like the lightest area on this panel to really show that Komari is coming up out of the darkness, back onto the street level. The worst part of her ordeal is over. Which, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go read chapter 21. Why are you watching me work on chapter 22 if you haven't read chapter 21? All right. So again, we're going to do just a little bit of this shading that follows that perspective grid, because it helps to, for one, differentiate this wall from this wall, but also to help keep everything looking like it's in the correct perspective, looking like it's taking up 3D space the way it's supposed to, even if that is all an illusion. Alright. I don't like how that's shying away from the edge of the panel, so we're going to fill that in a little bit. There we go. What time is it? 9:32. So we've been at this for half an hour. We've got one panel background inked. All of the tools, straight edge and French curve inking done on these 3 panels. And got a pretty good start on this one for the freehand inking. Freehand nib inking. So onward. Press on. Right, so it's like one of those little stone columns, so it's going to get a little bit of this texture. Actually, this whole wall probably will too, but I'm getting there, a little bit at a time. This whole page is going to be rather work intensive between the stone textures and building up tones, and then this giant freaking panel at the bottom here. All right, clean some gunk off my pen. And more little dots, more stippling, all on this wall. Whee! I actually did this panel down here a little bit backwards. I usually like to put in the stippling first and then do my hatching. I don't know why. I think it gives me a more even coverage of the stippling, because I think I'm just like, when I'm working around the hatching, I'm trying to fill in gaps, which isn't necessarily helping anything. Like, it's not necessarily actually making a better result at the end. It kind of flattens out the tone, which is not really what I'm looking for. So I think this gives me better results. Helps me resist the subconscious urge to just fill everything in and make it even though that's not what I'm going for. All right, hang on, making you seasick here as I whip this around. Whee! Slowly but surely, making progress. Hey, how the heck do you not smear ink all over? It's Jason. Hey, Jason. Thank you for joining me. So I actually spent a good amount of time talking about that early on in this video, which is fine. I'm happy to go over it again. You have to approach the page really methodically. The ink dries pretty quickly, like it dries within a couple of minutes. So you really just have to make sure that you're working in a direction where your hand isn't going to be dragging through what you just worked on. So I did all of this, and then I turned the paper so that my hand is now off the paper entirely. It's just on the board as I'm working across this way. Since I'm right-handed, I'm working left to right primarily. Obviously, if you're left-handed, you'd do it the other way around. But yeah, it's basically a lot of like planning and attacking the page strategically. And I'm not going to say it never happens, because I definitely have dragged my hand through wet ink more times than I can count. It is absolutely a thing that happens. But it's really just about trying to plan your way around that, trying to keep yourself from getting in your own way. Almost there on the dots. Dots, dots, dots. Okay. So let's see. What am I going to do with this railing? That's a good question. I think the railing is just going to kind of be like a added on piece of wood. So that we can just do a regular hatching on. So now you can see too where my hand is now. While all of these dots are wet, now I've moved on to working on a section where my hand is on these stairs over here, which I inked at the very beginning of the session, so they're super dry. See, stippling seems to be what I would call the pinnacle of my artistic ability. Stippling can make some really cool results, especially it's little bug, go away. You're not welcome here. The fact that it does take a really long time and you have to be really deliberate and slow, I think can be really helpful for people too. You have plenty of time to build towards something, ease up on it, and then be like, yeah, okay, that's where I want it, and stop. Whereas a lot of other techniques, it's like, oh, I made one mark and now it's ruined forever. All right. I'm kind of making a gradient on this one too, because get all the lights up at the top here. Oops. And I'm slipping out of frame. All right. So now, of course, I've done that thing to myself where now I can't work over here because that railing's wet. So I'm going to come back over here and work on some stuff up in this corner. Don't want to make these windows super dark. Like they're going to be dark in comparison to what's around them, but I don't want them to be super dark because I want this to be really like the lightest part of this panel. It's just going to be kind of a very light application of some shading up here. I may very well actually go in, now that I'm looking at it, I might actually go in with whiteout afterwards and break up some of these lines so they're not quite so bold and dark, just to make it a little more daylighty up here. Let's see. And Jason says, this always seems sort of magical to me. Line, 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 dot, dot, poof, scene. Yeah, that's what my husband says about watching me draw or ink or anything, is that he's like, it's just like a bunch of lines, and then all of a sudden it looks like a thing. Which is actually a really nice compliment, so. The trick to the magic trick, of course, is that I have an idea in my head the whole time. You just don't know what it is. I know where I'm going. You just don't know where I'm going. All right, I'm going to put in my little guidelines here to keep my lines in this, my hatching lines in this big open area as straight as possible, because without some little guidelines breaking up that big open space, they're likely to veer out of straight into being kind of wonky. So then you have a wall that on one side is straight and on one side is at like 30 degrees, and it makes you look like you inked the page like under the influence or something, which is not what I'm going for. All right, starting down in this corner, because I'm going to be going again from left to right, because this is still a wee bit wet, but if I start down in this corner, I've got a little time before my hand is going to have to be up here. Are these pages actual size as they will appear in print? No, they are way bigger. So these pages, the piece of paper is, sorry, my camera's kind of zoomed in pretty far so you can see what I'm doing, but the piece of paper is 11 by 17. The live area where the panels actually are is 10 by 15. And then it's going to get reduced down to usually a 6 by 9 book. And online it's only 700 pixels wide by usually an average of like 1,035 pixels tall. So it's going to reduce down quite a bit. And yeah, some of this detail you're probably not really going to see. I have toyed with the idea of doing like a larger size, not like a full size print, but a slightly larger size print run, like, oh, I don't know, instead of doing a 6 by 9, doing like an 8 by 12 type book or something like that, or maybe even a little bigger. But it would be expensive to do that. So part of why I keep it at the 6 by 9 books is that they're nice and affordable, and they're an easy size to hold and read. So maybe someday, whenever it's all done, I'll do a deluxe edition and print them really big so you can see more of the artwork. Start filling all of this in. Now this should be pretty dry, so I can start moving my hand over here and not worry about destroying everything and being sad forever. Filling in all of those little scratch marks. Burp, burp, burp. This page is probably going to be like the largest number of hours I have in any single page in the entire upcoming volume, and it's only like the 15th page in like a 200-page book. Because I'm crazy. So like right now I'm working on this crazy page, and then another comic artist that I follow on Instagram, named Philip Clay, who, if you want to follow him on Instagram, his artwork is incredible and you totally should. But you can find him there as Dark Line Sparrow Line. And he's also doing like this big crazy crowd scene type thing, but he's doing like multiple pages of these big like crowd scenes, and it's like some kind of, it looks almost like a Divine Comedy type sequence where he's got multiple pages of like choruses of singing people and like legions of the damned and all of that. And so he's doing page after page of all these really dense crowd scenes at the same time that I've been uploading progress on this, and we're both just like commenting back and forth like, ha ha, I'm not the only crazy one. And that is when Amanda decided that no one will ever be in this stairwell again. Well, it's true. They probably won't be. I actually don't think the story is even going to come back to this location. Possibly ever. I mean, it might, like, and by location, I mean, like, this entire area of the world. I might have a couple of, like quick scenes of other things happening kind of near here, but none of the main cast, I think, is ever coming back to this area. I say that as if I'm 100% confident in what my story is going to do. Like, I know vaguely what it's going to do, but as any writer will tell you, characters have a way of going, oh, you think so, and running off and doing their own thing. I shall not be contained. Frolics off into the distance. Okay, we're getting there. We're getting there. Slowly but surely, we're getting there on this stairwell. And now it is 9:48, so the hour is wearing on. I mean, yes, I'll probably still be working for quite a while, but I try to keep these videos down to about an hour because realistically, how long are you going to sit here and watch me hatch and stipple? Darkening this up a little bit and also trying to keep it a little bit more even, because as you can see, there's a few spots where it got a little bit thicker than others, where sets of lines overlapped. I hear that a lot. Okay, Jason says, yes, I hear that a lot, actually. In interviews, it tends to be a lot of, well, the story took me to where it needed to go. Yeah. Although that's actually, I have a fun story about that where, although I can't tell you all the details because they haven't come up in this story yet, but I have, like, I know it's very tempting and it's a very common thing that people do in fantasy stories where they're like, I've developed this entire world and it's 10,000-year history and I'm going to tell you all of it in the first 10 pages. And you won't even have met any characters yet. And I hate that, and I was determined not to do that. And part of my determination in not doing that is that while I have a vague outline of the history of the world that this takes place in, the Age of Night takes place in, as I kind of have to because Drake's character has been reincarnating through all of it, so I have to have a few, like, basic ideas of, like, yeah, this particular incarnation lived in this time. And these things happened to him, but I don't have it like super duper in detail. It's kind of like a, middle school level history of the world. But the other thing was that in general, I just avoid doing too much concept development of anything until it's necessary, like until it's something that's going to be coming up. And I just keep a lot of the references to things going on in the world very vague and very open. And partially that's because that's how people talk. Like if you live in the world that you're in, you don't tend to go on really long, rambling expositions about it unless you're talking to a stranger. And I don't really have any strangers. I don't really have any fish out of water in this story. So, which is, that's the purpose of those characters in those stories. They're just there so that the other characters can spout exposition. I don't have that device, and so basically, like, people are generally making, really vague, offhanded comments about the state of different things so that nothing is spelled out until it needs to be. And partially this is just to save myself a lot of aggravation of coming up with a lot of crazy backstory that I'm never going to use, or being tempted to shoehorn it in when I don't need to, or dragging the story down with like, oh, but this one obscure part of the mythology seemed really cool, so I'm going to drag them into a part of the story that explores that, even though it's not necessary. But the other part of that is that since I had left a lot of things kind of open and without a lot of answers, is that while working on later parts of the story, I have allowed myself the ability to realize, like, oh, wait, no, this is what needs to happen. Like, this is the thing that's actually supposed to happen. This is where this story really needs to go. And it made the story, like, a million times better. And I can't tell you what that is yet because it hasn't been revealed yet, but I totally had one of those moments where if I had front-loaded more world building and exposition, I wouldn't have been able to have that revelation and to change major parts of the story later on down the line. Not in a way that betrays what came before, but what actually enhances what came before. Because, yeah, sometimes you don't know everything about your own story. It's got to develop organically. Let's see. And Jason had another comment. It's always my issue. You may have noticed playing games with me. If you let me, I will go on and on and on when my characters speak. I mean, yeah, it's just, you got the mic. You may as well use it. It's hard to give it up once you've got it. All that talking, I was parched. I had to take a sip of I've got stupid little drunk moth thing. Wait, why are you here? Go away. Stupid little drunk moths trying to crash my work session. At least it's only ink. The worst is when I'm doing like watercolor and I'll have a drunk moth come crashing into the middle of my watercolor, splash around and leave little wing prints all in it, mix colors up, and then I'm just like screaming at him. No, you're ruining everything. Oh, these frickin' stairs. Okay. So I am going to do a couple little sets of lines to show you that, yes, these are stairs. They are this shade, but I'm also going to do, it's kind of, I guess you could call it a cheat, but I think it really helps to keep the form, is just do a couple little cross-hatched lines on the very bottom here. Let's see, it is that you could hire him to do the stippling. I wish I could train moths to do stippling for me. That'd be nice. Oh, my pen's all gunky again. All right, let's see. It is 9:55, so I'm going to work on this for about 5 more minutes before I end the stream. So I appreciate anybody who came and spent time with me. I really enjoy that. I really like it when people talk to me and pose questions, as Jason's been doing. You're the best, Jason. Because, part of why I do this on the stream is so that not only do you get to see a sneak peek of what I'm working on and see the process and maybe learn something about the process, because absent questions, I will just run my mouth about what I'm doing. But it's cool getting to actually kind of like hang out and talk with people while I'm working on this too, because it's kind of lonely, you guys. Making these really intensely inked 200-page graphic novels is it's kind of a lonely endeavor. Nice to have some company once in a while. So I greatly appreciate anybody who comes and hangs out and leaves comments so that I can respond to them, even if they are not terribly relevant to what I am doing. I'm cool with random questions as well. That's totally fine. I want to say it was dating myself here a little bit, a Johnny the Homicidal Maniac comic, where in the credits and the inside cover it was like written, drawn, inked, and lettered, all by Shonen Vasquez. In parentheses, I'm so alone. That has literally stuck with me ever since, and that was probably that was like 20 years ago. Think about that all the time when it's like people ask me at conventions, like, "Oh, did you draw this comic?" "Yeah, I did." "Oh, did you write it too?" "Yeah, I did. I'm so alone." I'm so alone. So 9:57, I'm almost at the hour. I'm definitely not finishing all of the inking on this page in this hour, but we've made some really good progress. I've got the background to one panel finished anyway, and all of the tools inking on this one, all of my straight edge and French curve inking is done on that one. All the straight edge and French curve inking is done on this, and I'm a pretty good way through doing all the freehand inking too, so definitely made some good progress here this evening. So if you're watching this at some point and somehow, I don't know why or how, but if you're watching it at some point, then you should totally like this YouTube channel if you have not already, so that next time that I go live, which I haven't 100% settled on Saturday evenings, but I'll hopefully have a more set day and time that we can all adjust to soon. If you have a suggestion for a time, by all means, please comment it. I am totally open to suggestions. Sometimes don't work terribly well for me because of other commitments. Like every Thursday I have a game session, and most Wednesdays I have game sessions. Douglas of Victory Condition Gaming. So like those nights don't work. And then just recently, some friends of mine who actually live somewhat locally to me are like, "Oh, we should start doing Tuesday gaming sessions." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, so I guess I can't do anything on Tuesday nights." And, just life and kids and all that jazz. Always something going on. And I might want to not commit every single night of the week of my life to something or other so that I maybe have time to actually, speak to my husband, maybe? I don't know. That seems like a thing people do sometimes. And Jason says, I watched a fellow drawing panels at AnimeCon once. It was amazing to see him just sit there one place for so long working on a single page. You can just call him Doug. Yeah. He is just Doug most of the time. He's Douglas when I'm mad at him. But I was only pretending to be mad at him. So that's been an hour. And thank you all very much. You can check out, this page will be up in, about 6 weeks or so on ageofnight.com. I just finished Interlude 3 on ageofnight.com, so Chapter 22 is going to be starting this coming Wednesday, so definitely check that out. Thanks, everybody, and I'll see you next time.